Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. People who are on a Zoom, I see a number is growing on our Zoom call, and welcome to the people who are also joining us on a Facebook. Um, Today, we have a very, very interesting session for you guys. My name is Nadeem Malik. I'm a member Digital Assurance Board set up by Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. I'm also a daytime job. I work for Oracle as well. Uh, Today we have eminent speakers from different part of the world, I would say, because Asif Salim is joining us from Singapore. We have a Saud Hashmi Saab joining us from Pakistan, and then we have an excellent moderator, Nabil Saab. We have the privilege to have Rana Usman Saab from ICAP today with us, and we are expecting Mr. Iftihar Taj to join us shortly as well. First of all, I would like to definitely congratulate ICAP for such a timely needed initiative. We all know the technology impact is changing the way we're doing our business, the way we're living our life. I think today's this webinar now become the routine thing, which was not thought of it, but even a year and a half ago, before the COVID, that we would be having such an engaging conversation and a useful and impactful events online, and people can join the layer of their own places, and we can work with more productive. So having said that, the technology is bringing a lot of changes, a lot of impact, specifically for the auditing and finance and accounting profession. I think that's where the ICAP initiatives are multiple initiatives. This is one of them to prepare future accountant. What is accounting future as well? How different things are impacting, how this profession is going to take a new shape. The data enormity today we see around us is very difficult to make any decision or the right decision at the right time and get that competitive advantages. Today, I think that you will hear from the right people who are in this field, explaining how the decision making is done through the data driven. We call it data driven decision making. Pastly, human being always made a decision based upon data, but the amount of the data available previously was not that as enormous as today. The data is continuously, what we call is data is flowing in continuously from different streams, and how you make insight, valuable insight to have a competitive advantage for your business is the key. I think that's the objective of it. And I hope everybody will enjoy it, listening to it, and we have a question answer session towards it. And I just, with the permission of the chair, I would like to formally begin with the recitation of the Holy Quran. I'll invite ICAP for that.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله خالقنا المولانا العلي العظيم.
Jazakallah. Now I hand over the whole session to Nabil. Nabil is going to be moderating this session. Nabil Mirza is a first ever chartered accountant to have ventured into the field of data science. He's been a part of the leadership team on various UK-based IT startups called Convena, and he has also had a venture into work for Workday, which is one of the famous ERP solution online, which has been used by 50% of the Fortune 500 companies. Nabil loves a variety of topics ranging from quantum mechanics, statistic analysis, psychology, which is important, business innovation, and mathematics. Nabil, all forum is yours.
Yeah, hi, this is Nabil here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the introduction, Nabil. Thanks for the introduction and your kind remarks. So, as I said, my name is Nabil. I'm a chartered accountant qualified in Pakistan, and since then, after qualifying in 2005, actually moved to London. I started working with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then afterwards moved to different various international banks. So I had quite a good understanding of the data and underlying database structures. So I then moved into that field, basically not actually recognizing initially the direction, but then later on I came to the professionals who were labeling themselves as data scientists, and I got quite intrigued by this term, you know. So I asked one of those guys, I said that data science, what is it? Well, I've never heard of it. So they then said that, you know, it's actually an emerging field, you know, more so after the likes of Google and Facebook start processing a huge amount of volume of data. So I saw that it was becoming very prevalent in that, you know. But then, so I decided to get my hands dirty. I'm like a very hands-on kind of person. So I actually started to learn coding. I'm a chartered accountant first. I'm a data scientist second, but I'm a finance subject matter expert. And when you join business as a finance, whatever subject matter expertise you have, but here we are all of accountants, so we are finance subject matter experts. So if you join a business as a finance subject matter expert, but you then sort of go out of your comfort zone a little bit, and you know, go back in your chain and start understanding those processes that actually start producing those data. You know, you might not need to be a data scientist or a coder, but if you have the ability to understand those data pipelines, that actually will make you much more valuable and much more sought after in the existing job market. And there are a lot of jobs that will be coming your way, and I think those will be very interesting jobs. That's all about me, you know. Thanks a lot for listening, you know, and later on, you know, if anyone wants to ask any question, I will be more than happy to answer. But here I would like to take opportunity to really introduce two of our shining stars, you know, who are actually have very kindly joined us today, and they are actually going to share that experience. You know, they are going to give you a practical insight of what I've been sort of building narrative around, is that how the data and its value can basically be a practical tool. So my first keynote speaker, his name is Asif Salim, and I think Asif has over 2 decades of experience in a very senior positions. He's currently working as an senior director, innovation advisor, JPEG Oracle Corporation. He has worked in various industries, from Standard Chartered Bank, IBM, and also across multiple geographies, you know. His key area of expertise include end-to-end digital transformation. Again, you can see that data and artificial intelligence. He's a trusted advisor and remains passionate about business, technology, design, and customers' experience. He's an executive member of AI Forum New Zealand and part of Future of AI course team at Singularity University and INSEAD. These are huge credentials. These are very valuable credentials, and we are very excited to listen to him and learn from him what he's going to share his experience. And my second keynote speaker, another shining star, is Saud Hashmi. I think Saud, if I had also had a chat with him, Saud worked in, he has spent over 25 years developing and building new data and digital businesses for some of the largest companies in the world, for investors and as an entrepreneur himself. His most recent work is working with PricewaterhouseCoopers, A.F. Ferguson, building up big data analytical practice in Pakistan. He has spent a lot of time across geographies, a lot of time in US, Dubai, and in various ventures. And I think it's a great he's a great asset for Pakistan that he's now working in for the PricewaterhouseCoopers. So this is sort of a very short introduction, but I think we are going to listen a lot of word of wisdom from our speakers. So without any delay, I would like to invite Mr. Asif Salim to give his presentation, which is the international perspective of data-driven decision making. Thank you, Asif.
Thanks a lot, Nabil. Thank you for sharing your experience. It's really heartening to see how you're basically doing multiple things at a time, working for a company in the morning and then basically also kind of investing time in startups. So before I start my presentation, I like to hear from audience if they can hear me clearly, because I think they were facing some difficulty. I think what you guys can do is actually either write your comments to kind of say that you can hear me clearly, or give me a thumbs up, right? So that will at least tell me that you guys can hear me clearly.
Yeah, you can. You're loud and clear. My thumbs are up too.
Excellent, excellent.
Yes, Asif, it's good. Good voice.
Thank you. Okay, so let's start with my presentation. I'm really, really thankful for inviting me to such an esteemed professional forum. This is my first time speaking at ICAP Pakistan. I'm of course originally from Pakistan, but I left Pakistan close to about 15 years ago. As Nabil said, I've got 2 decades of experience working within financial services, business and technology. Had the opportunity to spend a significant amount of my time at Standard Chartered. Out of the 2 decades, worked for Standard Chartered for 15 years, doing country, global, regional roles for them, having lived in Pakistan, Singapore, and Malaysia with them. And then out of passion for data, basically I left Standard Chartered and joined IBM. And that was the time where cognitive solutions businesses were really, really, enhancing all across the Japan, Asia Pacific region. My quest for AI, artificial intelligence, and data-driven technologies actually took me to IBM. And with IBM, I actually moved to Indonesia, Jakarta as well, where I was there for about 2 years as the country chief digital officer for IBM Indonesia, doing some really, really, interesting work across various different sectors. And then while I was there, I was headhunted by Oracle to be back to Singapore. It's almost 3 years at Oracle. My current role is the Senior Director, Banking Innovation Advisor for Japan, Asia Pacific region, where I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of senior bankers, a lot of finance professionals, a lot of change makers on a daily basis. And I've tried to summarize some of that thought process over here when I was speaking to Saud Hashmi Saab and the rest of the team. So I'll continue to move ahead. So basically, like Nabil shared about how the finance ecosystem is changing, and to me, the finance ecosystem is changing for better. It is changing because it is providing you a lot of opportunity. All of you guys are either senior accountant, junior accountants, or future CFOs, future finance professionals will be dealing with various different kind of technologies. So let's briefly understand what's the role of accountants today, and basically how accountants are kind of dealing with technology today. And in a lot of ways, some of these guys, kind of see themselves that you're finance professionals, you're not technologists, but let me tell you, a lot of that is changing. Second, how it will be different soon. I think we need to understand where the future will be, where we will be in 5 years down the road, how the world around us is changing, specifically with COVID-19. A lot of stuff has really fast tracked. So we need to understand that. And then the changes are basically in industry and market agnostic. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of commonality that is getting developed across multiple industries. And I'm going to share briefly about that as well. So if I look at accountants today, a lot of this is basically about invoices. It's about, data crunching. It's about kind of going through a little bit of planning around making sure that the payments are done in a really correct way, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, that's all very relevant today. But in a few markets, this is already changing and significantly changing, where basically the move to modern technologies. So some of those technologies Nabil talked about in his presentation, but then there's a lot more technology that is now at the disposal of finance professionals, such as conversational AI, such as modern data warehousing solutions, such as modern data enterprise applications, which will do the heavy lifting for you. And a lot of the job of modern finance professional is to basically be able to kind of inquire and quest for information to get the right information. So there's a shift happening from you doing the number crunching and kind of doing the hard work versus basically you doing the hard work, but more on the mental side and kind of letting the other work done by the machine themselves. I'm sure this looks very familiar. Excel, I think is the go-to software for a lot of accountants till today. I see a lot of, modern companies are now moving towards ERP, but still, a lot of them are still using Excel. A lot of new age startups, small startups, they want to always start with Excel. But again, there's a limitation of this lovely software that finance professionals love. And we soon realize that the amount of data crunching, the amount of correlations that is required, Excel kind of gives up. So then how do you kind of solve for that, right? And I think it's very, very important that, you need to have access to modern ERP applications, modern data ecosystems that are now readily available. And they're very easily available in the form of various different solutions that makes the job easy for you. I'm sure this is something that all of you guys in the call can resonate. Say it be as senior as Saud Hashmi or Usman Saab, and say it be as a lot of young professionals who are now kind of going through the journey of getting certified and then entering into professional field. And I think this is a significant shift that is happening, right? So if you look at it based on the research that was done by Gartner, almost 70% of the professionals, especially white collar job professionals, they will have to learn to interact with conversational AI platform. And what do I mean by that, right? A simple definition of a conversational AI platform is a platform through which you can converse and basically give various different instructions, and the platform will be able to kind of follow those commands. So such as platform like Alexa, etc., that are more like chatbots or digital assistant, which will listen to you and kind of decipher that information of yours into some kind of data points, and then basically work with the solution at the back end to produce a valuable output for you. Now that output is what you need to understand and spend a lot of time in terms of taking active decisions on. I'll explain that a little bit, in details. As we say, seeing is believing. To me, the modern future of all of you as finance professionals will be something like this, right? So if let's suppose you are a chief financial officer of a company, you will have a big team to look after. In spite of all the digitization, as Nabil talked about, the importance of finance professionals is almost there, because it's a specialist area. You are the domain experts, and all the companies will continue to kind of invest in this area. And you will have team, and these team would be reaching out to you for various kind of information. And a lot of the time consuming things will will not necessarily be required to be done by you. They can be done digitally, and they can be done through modern chatbots, right, which will make it extremely easy for you. Then if your employee is basically planning for a travel, it would be very easy as well. In a lot of cases, I know that finance professionals, procurement professionals, HR professionals have to deal with this kind of stuff. A lot of this can be done digitally. If your manager, if your boss basically is looking for a new level insight, they want to understand how the ecosystem is changing, or what's the return on investment that was made a couple of years ago, how is it basically paying us back in terms of new customers, new a revenue opportunity, how does it compares with when it comes to cost to income ratios. A lot of that information is now digitally available at the at simply a voice note away, right? And I think this is where all of you guys will be kind of dealing with this in next 5 years. Of course, it depends on market maturity. I can tell you in Singapore, a lot of this has already started to happen. Nabil can also share a little bit about how it's happening in UK and other developed EMEA market. Uh, the same has also started to happen in some capacity within Pakistan and subcontinent region as well. So moving on, these platforms are so flexible that basically they can really empower and kind of within a matter of seconds can come up with new age information, making your decision process extremely easy. So I think that, as I said earlier, the bulk of the battle would not be basically about crunching the information. The bulk of the battle would be basically how do you kind of use and consume that information to take meaningful decisions. So moving on, what's actually empowering that? What's the factor that will really be kind of defining the future of modern day decision sciences? To me, the answer is a single data model. We see that almost all the functions, say it be sales, marketing, customer service, finance, procurement, human resources, they need to come together in some kind of a single data model where all this data is kind of collected together in a single experience layer. And on top of that, you have modern BI business solutions that can basically be connected to front-end applications, say it be chatbot, say it be audio, speech, or whatever kind of forum that you want to use, and it can extract that information for you. And a lot of that power that will come to the single data model is the ability to kind of kind of correlate. So what impact is basically the new number of human resources that has been added to the sales function, creating on market development, or basically the new finance professionals that have been added, what kind of new insights that they are able to generate, which is helping drive sales and marketing effort. So a lot of this correlation or cross collaboration would be very easily possible through this modern single data model ecosystems. And there's a big shift happening on the consumer side. We all know that, say it be Pakistan or say it be India, say it be Bangladesh, a lot of these markets are getting heavily digitized. I think they used to be a joke before COVID-19 that there were always talks of digitization. But I can tell you, digital is the forefront agenda in any boardroom meeting conversation today. And why is that happening? Because there's a significant consumer shift that is driving the change. You can be part of any industry, whether you're part of a bank or a manufacturing unit or a college or basically, an educational institute or anything, right? At the end of the day, you'll be dealing with consumers. And the modern day consumers are demanding a very, very different kind of customer experience. If you holistically look at the world population today, 70% of the world population is less than 30 years old, which means that the overall there's a very young population, And these people are, always on mobile, they're always digital, they are cloud native kind of people. They believe in the power of collaboration, speed, agility is everything for them. Now, in order for you to be able to serve as finance professionals for your internal organization, to serve them better, you got to understand how they are thinking. And a lot of times customers are not thinking about milestones. They're thinking in moments, right? So if, let's suppose, I'm planning to start a family, I may have to kind of start planning to get a house. I may need to start planning for my weekly grocery list, because of course I'm expecting to add a little bit more on the kitchen side. Or for example, I'm planning to go to a good graduates college, let's suppose go to UK or US, and there's a hefty fees attached to it. I'm kind of planning to do that right away when I'm doing my articleship, or I'm doing some other job to kind of get through that experience. So that's where there's a significant shift that we see happening. And a lot of this data is now available in real time, near real time, which can really help you take some really, really meaningful decisions. And my whole objective over here is that we've got various new forms of data visualization that are available, say it be graph technology, say it be spatial, and they'll be able to do a lot of linkages, which will really help you become successful as you continue to move forward. One of the things that basically Saud Saab had asked me to do was to kind of draw parallel between various industries based on my experience working at Oracle. And let me tell you that basically I see a lot of commonality, happening in various industries. And I'll try to explain that with few examples. So as a banking innovation advisor for the Japan Asia Pacific region, I'm seeing a significant shift that is happening in the banking world today. There's a shift that is happening from traditional banks that are extremely brick and mortar driven to modern digital banks. Now, these digital banks are banks which will primarily be driven by mobile. These will be banks that will be basically kind of can be accessed through mobile, and a lot of modern day capabilities, say it be sales, service, transaction, can be done through these modern digital platforms. The same will apply in your industry as well. Say it be if you're a manufacturing company, or if you're, let's suppose, a college, or if you're, let's suppose, a fast moving goods company or a distribution house, you are also facing the same kind of challenge. And let me explain that to you with an example, and how data driven technologies can really, really create a significant impact. I'm not sure how many of you guys have basically kind of are keen follower of the sport of Formula One. Oracle recently partnered with Red Bull Racing. Now, Red Bull Racing is a Formula One team, and the art of Formula One is that basically their whole ecosystem is performing in near real time. So it's a 3 hour, 3.5 hours race where a Formula One car is basically traveling at 200 miles, close to about 360 to 70 kilometers per hour. And while they are doing so, they are releasing a lot of information in real time, which kind of gives a real time understanding of what's the position of the car. Is the car in a great position to survive the race? What's the position of the tires? Are the tires good enough to basically sustain? Or if there's a weather forecast, if there's a rain that is coming, what will be the position of the driver when the pit stop happens? And the whole point is, if you analyze the sport of Formula One, it has really transformed over the last 30 to 40 years. The same is actually happening in your industry. And let me explain that a little bit more in details of what is happening. So if you look at in a Formula One team, there's normally a team principal and a CEO. I'm sure in day out, as chief financial officers, as finance managers, as accountants, you're dealing with some C-level executives. And these C-level executives are now always looking for experts. So going back to what Nabil was saying, finance professionals will always be in need, because If you're a part of a finance company, if you're part of a manufacturing unit, they need specialists. They need people who can understand this day in, day out. Moving on, the role of the chief engineer, the guy who's basically kind of planning the whole ecosystem, the guy who's planning the engine, the guy who's planning how the car will be kind of curated over the next 6 months so that when it goes on the track, it performs and comes out as the best. And here, the biggest thing that is actually on the minds and hearts of all C-level executives today is how can I create the most efficient and the most effective car, yet the most agile and the fastest car. And I think the roles of financial professional comes in really handy over here because, not only in terms of basically what budgets, what finances to allocate, how to kind of optimize those ecosystems to make sure that you get the most out of the every cents and dollars that are being spent. We are in a very different kind of environment today. Companies do not have huge budgets. The margins are shrinking these days, right? We are not in an environment where there's a lot of cash available for existing enterprises. Of course, the startups stories are different because these are new ideas that are trying to kind of fill the vacuum, but I think that's very important. And I think if you look at data driven today, what is the role of finance professionals as well? Because at the end of the day, how much value you can create with the existing resources on table. Here, if you look at the example, Jonathan Whitley basically created the fastest pit stop, which was basically 1.82 seconds for Red Bull Racing. And in that 1.82, if you could see, there were around 10 people, 10 engineers that are working on the car. And within a matter of 1.82 seconds, they basically refueled the car, they changed the tires, they kind of, fixed whatever stuff needs to be done. And the car is on the way back, trying to compete and win the race. That is exactly the expectation from modern CFOs, modern finance professionals. How quickly you can analyze the data and basically be able to kind of get the production units, get the finance and banking operations, get the modern mobile banking applications back out on its way so that maximum value can be achieved out of it. And then, all of this effort is to basically empower the employees and the customers, right? Because at the end of the day, every organization has a lot of employees that are working day in, day out to kind of enhance their productivity. And I think future finance also has a very important role in there. And then lastly, what is very important over here is to kind of bring the whole team together. Not only about kind of allocating budgets, making the right kind of environment available. I think what's also important is that future finance professionals start seeing them as leaders of big teams, as change makers, as people who are really going to use data-driven science and through which they'll be able to make a significant impact to the company as well as the teams that are working in there. And while we are doing that, let's not forget the fans, because every action that we are doing in the company today as a finance professional gets noticed by our fans on social media, by our fans and our customers who are basically going out to purchase that product or are using that modern mobile banking application or are basically even eating out at restaurants, right? So we need to understand the value and the kind of data that is basically be provided with every opportunity and measure that to drive the change. And with that, I'll come to my last slide. And I think it's a very important slide. Understand the importance of partners, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of this cannot be achieved individually. You got to have the right partners, people who understand the space, people who have been there and done that, and kind of bring them together to learn from them, their experience, both on the business side, on the technology side, on the operations side, but also kind of co-create this with them. I think modern finance professionals cannot work in silos. They have to come out and basically be the change makers and basically lead this with third-party technical partners as well as drive this for their own teams. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. And this is just a kind of a futuristic a kind of a scorecard which can all be consumed digitally to kind of create value for you. So thanks a lot for giving me opportunity. I'd like to hand it over to Saud Hashmi Saab to kind of carry with his part of the presentation.
So thank you, Asif. Sab, if I can intervene for a minute.
Yes, Nadeem.
All right. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation, Asif. I think I intervened to introduce President of ICAP for his few words, but before I ask him to join for his some viewers, excellent presentation. I think, so before I ask you to do it, I would like to invite Mr. Iftihar Taj, President ICAP, for his kind word. He joined a little bit because he was busy in some other commitment. Iftihar Taj's leadership under ICAP, I think, has emerged the new face of ICAP, brought into the new perspective and the future of the accounting and audit profession. I think that's where the emerging landscape is visible to all people who are joining this profession or all are in this profession. So I would like to invite Iftihar Saab for his kind words.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nadeem, for your kind words and the introduction. This is very, very important. At the beginning, I'd like to congratulate members on putting up this webinar. Important for everyone, every individual. And for us in particular, being accountants and chartered accountants, we all the time deal with numbers. We all the time deal with data. Analytics, yes, we do a little bit, but not to that extent. We do not do the data mining and things like that. But the role is changing, the world is changing, and technology is bringing us more opportunities to carry out the analysis and convert into knowledge and then translate into value creation. Something I like to share with you that whenever we speak about it, data and role of CFO and accountants at IFAC level, International Federation of Accountants, generally we discuss what will be the role of a CFO. Would he be doing the same stuff like preparing balance sheet, disclosures for the stakeholders, number crunching, implementation of technology, or there will be some other role, and what that role could be? Generally, the consensus among all the members over there, like representing.
We're losing your voice somehow.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yeah, it's fine. Iftihar Saab, please carry on.
Okay. I thought I was unable to listen. So whenever we talk about the role of CFO at IFAC level, they generally the technology will take over the CFO. Technology will take over the role of a professional accountant or a chartered accountant. How we will carry on the role of CFO or substantial part of our CIO or CTO or some other. And generally the consensus is that role will stay there, but our focus will change. All the time we will be working on one thing only, and that is value creation. Value creation through data analysis, through data analytics, and building the insights for boards that how we can move forward and create value for the organization, for the society, for the stakeholders. Society is a major stakeholder in every commercial organization. And then one question generally arises that we are not things, what to do. And that this takes us to next level. And the level is that will be data scientists in finance department under CFO. And we all have to do the data analytics. For the professional accountants or the strategist, everybody has to do it. We are holding data all the time. We are the custodian of data. And the 10 chairmen of the groups, they all will say one thing, common among all 10, that data should live with CFO and they should be carrying out the data analytics and they should be guiding us on what to do next and what are the opportunities available to us. Very, very important for everybody. And I congratulate to Chairman of Digital Board, Mr. Rana Osman, and all the members who are putting up so many efforts for our members that how we are moving forward. They are future of the chartered accountants. That's very, very important. That what should be our direction in future? What are those things that we should be working on? It's not the accounting only. It's more of a science now. It's more of a data all the time. And when data is converted into figures, that is more understandable. So we need to present everything in the, we record the business accounting language, then translate into business language, and then we communicate to the others, all the stakeholders. And that's what we need to do. To me, I think one of the questions could be, yes, what is data analytics? We all the time talk about it. How to do it? Okay. Talk about it. But the starting point, what should be the starting point for a middle level manufacturing company? From where they should start? What about the high-end company? From where they start? What about the companies who are not having chartered accountants in their organization? How they should start? And how ICAP can play a role? What will be the insights from this webinar? I think there should be some kind of booklet published, not in print form, but in digital form. After all, this is digital assurance board. So Rana Sahab, I would request you to please look into these things as well. And I'm sure this will be speaking on that in the end. But starting point everywhere is difficult, and where we are heading 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. With that, I congratulate all of you once again. I don't want to take much of the time because I'm sure it's waiting for the insights from all the experts. And thank you very much to speak to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tahar, for your time and kind remarks. Now I hand over the floor back to Nabil for to take it over. Nabil, all yours.
Thank you, Tahar, for such a good insight into the role of CFO and how it will interact with data science. But one quick observation, personal observation that I would just like to make before inviting Mr. Saud is, in my personal view, accounting is actually the earliest form of data science. Accounting was invented in Italy around 17th century, basically to write down basically loans and advances data. And then subsequently, by producing balance sheet, P&L, and summarization, that was actually one of the key component of data science, which is called classification, where we try to understand the transaction and just say how they classify into different groups. So it's a good thought to take away that as an accountant, actually, we are practicing an earliest form of data science when there was no computer and when there was no automation. So definitely our role should continue in the new age. With that, I would like to invite our second keynote speaker, Mr. Saud Hashmi, to give us his views on the national perspective of data-driven decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to speak with you. Iftikhar Saab, aapne jo baatein kari, they were actually, they lead very nicely into my presentation, because a lot of this is not about a new thing. It's about technology that just helps you do and create value better, particularly when it comes to accountants and to CFOs. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you see it. 1 second. G, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, it's visible.
Excellent. So just to pick up from Iftikhar Saab's point, the purpose of doing all of this actually is value creation. So the way I've looked at analytics in a very practical sense is very much in terms of how do you create value from it. So whatever we do in the context of data analytics, AI, machine learning in Pakistan should be about bottom line. And I think that's where the real battle is. I find it interesting that a global perspective on this always talks about what all is possible. I think a lot of the problem in Pakistan is not about what's possible, it's about what's practical and doable. And I think we'll talk a little bit about those challenges. I wanted to just make sure everyone understood that this is not about us becoming smarter as people. In fact, I would venture to say some of the early people who worked on these things were much smarter than we can be. We're actually lazy because of their efforts. But it's about technology change. What's happened is that enabling technologies come up, which has caused us to now have this conversation this way. I'm going to share with you a quote. This is a 5-year-old quote. So if anybody thinks that this is going to happen, they need to realize that this is happening. The world 5 years ago moved from a world which was about connectivity to being a world about cloud and data in clouds, and therefore algorithms on the data. In fact, what I would venture, and you can probably think about this yourselves, everyone, is that out of the 10 to 20 companies that have created the most value globally in the last 10 to 15 years, I would urge you to think about them first and foremost as data companies and AI and machine learning and analytical companies, which they all are. The scalability of some of the scalability of the ideas is all about analytics and data and algorithms. Now, let me first just tell you, as we said, what the technology does. What the technology does is it allows all of us to benefit from. The point I was making is very simple. Regression actually was one of the first algorithms that was done. It was done 150 years ago. Regression is done by hand, or used to be done by hand in a very much of the way machine learning works, where you put stuff in and you saw it and you saw whether or not it actually worked, and you kept on doing it. So it's not like we're smarter, right? These are not things we've discovered now. What changed is just computing power and scalability. On the one hand, it's meant that the amount of data we have is just mushroomed exponentially. So we've got 90% and probably more of the total data, which is around today, is like less than 2 years old. What it also does, on the other hand, is because now we have all this data, unless you do a lot more analytics with it, because you've gone to an environment where the data is now not constrained by simply having just a certain amount of data. And you can pick anything you want to pull it into your models. Now, what it has led to, and I think this is the part of it which is difficult for us, is with this making it affordable to everyone, we now are increasingly in a world where the analytics and the indicators and the algorithms are determining outcomes, right? So they're telling us what is right, what is wrong, what to do, what not to do. And this is a very big change that's happened. Historically, when we looked at data, we tended to look at data on a backwards perspective. Now, all of this data and the analytics is showing us is why things are happening and what might happen. Now, there's a danger to this, and I just wanted to give you guys a sense of this. We've talked about a little bit of this earlier, which is once machines start to do this work of like the why things happen, right? The real problem for us becomes, how do we understand what's happening, and how do we understand whether or not what's happening is right? I'll just give you a simple example. This came up like a year ago, but it's a very important example because this is considered one of the best companies in the world. Here you have, and if people don't know this example, this is Apple released an Apple Card. And obviously as those of you that work with financial services know, a lot of the credit card efforts are algorithm based, right? There's a set of scores which together determine whether or not, set of scores together determine whether or not the company, whether or not to give the person the credit and how much credit to give the person. What they realized, and this is Apple, so they, after all their vaunted technology, the machine learning, the partnership with Goldman Sachs on this topic, everything, what they found was that the algorithm was discriminating. It was discriminating on people in the same household just because one of them was male, one was female, even though they were joint household with joint income. And this is, I think, the struggle with a lot of us have, which is even if we have people that can do data science for us, how do we trust it? And how much can we trust it? And I think this is part of the challenge that I've seen in Pakistan. So some part of the challenge in Pakistan is even if you had a data scientist doing data work, how can you trust the outcomes and how can you trust what they're doing? Let me, on this topic, just give you a quote, which is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Confucius. He said this a long time ago: I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So as much as we can talk about this, one of the things I wanted to tell you is that people have just got to do what's the challenge in this? You're moving historically, and what accountants did was they counted what was. So they looked at the business and they could tell you what the business was now. And you know, some of you might know, but most of you don't know. My father's an accountant. In fact, he's been a former president of ICAP, and I grew up with a lot of respect for accountants because they knew what the business was. If you want to understand what a business is, you should talk to the accountant because he's going to tell you the flows. He's going to tell you what's going in and out. He's going to tell you where the risk seems to be sitting. And I think the thing now, the challenge that is in front of all of you is moving this type of diagnostic into much more of a predictive and a prescriptive paradigm. And it's not even something that and this is where the value is moving to, right? So as BI tools will give you a sense of what's happening, more and more we need to basically move to the idea of, okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean for the future for us? So historically, so historically, as I said, we looked at it very much from a descriptive standpoint. The three boxes, and I'll talk about these three boxes because this is really where data analytics is now. And it changes things a lot. So let's talk about these. We won't even go to the last box, which is autonomous AI, which they might be doing in the West, but my sense is in Pakistan, we're away from this yet to some extent. Diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. Diagnostic is why things are happening. Now, the minute you go into why, you need to have relationships thought through in mind. You need to have a sense of why certain behaviors happen. You need to be able to model those behaviors in your data. When you go from a diagnostic, so let's say I've done the diagnostic again, I'm looking at historical data and I said, Acha, why does this happen? So I have 5 types of customers, they behave differently, and I'm trying to understand why. I use data about those customers and I do statistics and I say, okay, here is what makes them different. Predictive says, okay, that's fine, but none of the past will actually maybe tell you what's going to happen in the future. So now let's use past data, let's start to predict what's happening in the future. Now the fundamental shift between these two is that when you start you know what, right? The data you have isn't about what has happened, it's about what could happen. And even what you're going to say is about what could happen. So the entire conversation becomes probabilistic, and it comes with a degree of uncertainty. From an accountant's perspective, what I've seen, the greatest challenge that accounting has is coming to terms with changing from being what is typically considered something which is about making sure that what you have is right, to now also try to do things where you're not sure, but this is your best sense of what's going to happen in the future. I will come to a very specific example about this with accounting, which is in front of all of you now, and will come. You guys have gotten a reprieve for a couple of years, but we'll be coming down the path soon on this. And the last piece, which is prescriptive, which you see only in some situations here. So for example, you'll see prescriptive analytics being done here, as we said, with banks and credit cards. Some of the new startups here are doing sort of real-time credit decisioning. That's prescriptive analytics, where based on who the person is and the markers, make a choice and not have a human say yes or no, but the choice just goes back out. The same is true, obviously, of a lot of the startups that are coming into the market, which are doing logistics and B2B, and obviously people like Daraz, where a whole host of functionality is happening, the products that they're showing you, nobody's telling them, you know, Hashmi buys this product, show him these two products. It's just showing me two products that people like me might have wanted to buy. And it could be two products that have nothing to do with me, but the quality of your prescriptive analytics makes those products be better and more tied to what I might want to buy. So it directly impacts your bottom line. Now, the second challenge that analytics, first of all, can everyone still hear me? Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Okay, great. The second challenge is that because of the computing power and the cloud, all the avenues of exploration are now open. So before, and I'll give you a very simple example of this. If in the past, when you didn't have computers and when you weren't recording data, you could record 2 points of data in the year. You could record data at the start of the year. You could record data in the middle of the year, and you could say, okay, that's what I have. And then you would do an average of that. You could say, okay, that's my 2 points. The average point is. Now, if I was to tell you that, oh, I can actually give you data, which is actually every second or every day, or forget every second in the Pakistani context, let's do it every day at the end of the day. So now I've got 365 data points. Now there's seasonality in the data, which is new information. You didn't know this before when you're just taking 2 points of data, right? That seasonality has an impact, significant impact on what you might want to do in terms of uncertainty, risk, and managing for that seasonality. So what's happened with the growth of not only the power, but also the data and the frequency of the data is that all sorts of things have opened up. Now, I don't put this out here to scare anybody, but I put this out here to say that you will, in the context of your jobs going forward, not only have to use some of these techniques or have somebody, but you certainly will see people within the business who will be showing results to you and will be telling you that this is the reason why I want to do something based on some of these techniques being applied. So obviously there's some structured techniques which are closer to us, where I would suggest that it's the way to focus from an analytics perspective to start with, which is regression and A/B and N testing. A/B and N testing is where you basically take one thing, you take another thing, and you say, okay, if this thing works like this, then it should have similar output. If it doesn't, it should have different output. And how do I understand what's similar and different, right? So there's a lot of different techniques and algorithms, and the challenge is that you can't learn all of them. I don't know all of them. My background is I did undergrad in econometrics and statistics at a time when to do a regression you had to get punch cards and give them to your computer lab, and you came back the next day and got the results, right? So that's where I started from. Within my 4 years of college, I was on computers and doing my own regressions myself. Within another 4 years of that, I was doing this stuff for any company that I was part of, and now anybody can do this. And in fact, this is happening around us as we speak. The third thing that this machine learning does, because see, historically, we would do a lot of the computational stuff ourselves or know it ourselves enough that we understood the outcome. The problem is what machine learning is doing is putting human beings from being in this mindset of knowing how to operate to being managers. So the more you start to think this way, my suggestion is that the future is going to be about not doing the data science, but setting up and understanding the data science and understanding the outputs and understanding the weaknesses and understanding the caveats. So understanding the application. And again, we'll come back to this when we talk about something which is very specific to you. Oops, sorry. The fourth challenge is that this is technological change which affects every part of your business, right? So it is absolutely not right to say that big data analytics and AI is only affecting customers or only affecting products. So it affects everything. And to give you an example of this, the way we look at it, or the way I choose to look at it, is that if you think about a business in like 3 big chunks of P&L effect you can do, you can either look at the business and say, what I'm going to do is going to lead to revenue growth, or you can look at the business and say it's going to lead to operational efficiency, so I will reduce the L on my bottom line, or you can look at it and say it's good, I'm going to improve the risk return profile of this business. So that starts to talk a little bit about shareholder value. In almost all of these, the things that you are trying to impact are the same, right? It's not like we're doing something that we never thought of doing before. It's the same things. You're just being able to do them far better. So let's take a point, and I'm not going to walk through all of these slides, being conscious of all of the points of this, but just let me give you a couple of examples to move on. You think about revenue growth, right? One thing you could do with analytics or with data or with anything is you say, okay, I want to better target my customers, right? So what does that mean? It means that rather than call 100 people to sell 5 things, I know the 20 people I can call to sell those 5 things. That's really valuable. Rather than basically selling those 5 things to people who only want just that and want the lowest version of that, let me sell it to those that want that plus the premium package. So how do I understand who to target? How do I understand how to stop people from leaving me, right? How do I compute and manage customers to higher lifetime values? Now, all of these pieces are pieces which historically people used to think of, but they would do it without data based on experience and gut. So 20 years ago, if we were having a conversation on segmentation, I wouldn't be able to do, maybe in Pakistan, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. If I did do the regression, it would be very hard to understand. But you know, I would probably say, look, I think people like this behave this way. Here's anecdotal proof, and we would make a choice based on what is an anecdotal proof that I'm giving you. Now, you don't need to do that at all. So now you're in the environment where everything that I say, or every model that I want to do, or every change I want to make to the business better be data-driven. And data-driven doesn't mean, oh, I tabulated the data and it gave me X. It means I segmented the customer base. These segments are different from one another statistically. I've shown that, right? This segment has higher value in this way. And it's significantly different, that it's worth looking at it this way. So the mindset of the organization and the people working needs to get to be data-driven. And what it means for you from a accounting, from a finance perspective, is that the people who will be speaking to you about what they want to do, so the marketing people in the organization in the future, or the sales people in the organization in the future, are not going to come to you and say, I want this much budget. They're going to say, I have these 5 segments I want to target. I would want to spend this much money on this segment, this much money on this segment. And by the way, you and them should say, okay, what is the target outcome? Because each time you do anything, the outcome starts to affect the model and the learning. So you get into this continuous data environment. And if you look at the biggest companies in the US, you know, I was lucky enough, I spent my first 14 years of my work experience all in the US with Citigroup, so large companies. And if you look over there, they have models and they have knowledge base on each one of these things, which is not just a year old, it's years old, right? And that's one of our challenges is that we don't have the history of being analytical by nature when it comes to understanding business this way in Pakistan. And again, I think this is where you have a real advantage. As accountants and finance professionals, you are the most analytical people in Pakistan. So there's anybody who can understand the analytical part of this and what applies and how much it applies, it's you. A lot of what I'm telling you, I can tell you like this because you understand it. If I was talking to marketing people, this conversation would be slightly different, I think, because they're not analysts fundamentally by nature. So I think if you can start to understand how the analytical piece has to now shift to, as if the Kharsab said, very much value add around these items, I think it's important. So I'm not going to go through the rest, but again, there's a lot of different things you could look at, right? So if you were a great analyst and you went into a business and there was a lot of data there that nobody used, you would start to say, wow, with this data, I can probably do this. And you'd have a whole list of things that you want to put in place in terms of models. And by the way, this is exactly how analytical transformation of large companies works. Whether or not you build the technology first, whether or not you build the analytics first, they start to go through and function by function, thing by thing, they make it smarter and better by putting in place models. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, the fifth challenge is therefore that as business runners and business being responsible for the business, you now start to go into a field where maybe managing the algorithms and the analytical models becomes really, really important. So before, analytics and algorithms were something that somebody did somewhere, we saw it, it was interesting, told us some good insights and we put the report away. Now, these are ongoing things. And they're affecting your business. They're sort of running your business. They're doing the KPIs of your business. They're doing the pieces of your business that essentially allow you to say, is my business performing well or badly? So I think being able to understand and manage these becomes important. Now, in this context, in the US, for example, and I've just got here the types of models. So you can start to understand that you could look at a business, from an account, imagine the analogy as an accountant, you look at the business, or as accountants, you look at the business and you look at it in terms of, revenue items, cost items, assets and liabilities. And now you can look at the business and you can look at it and say, okay, in this model that I have right now, there are about 30 specific models and analytical pieces. So you can say, okay, I have 30 models that are running in the business. How do I make sure the model is not got bias and not creating extra risk and is maximized and is like giving it and is living to its full potential? This is what the challenge in the US has become amongst a lot of companies. And a lot of the top companies in the US now that are technology forward, but even others are talking about the importance of the chief algorithm officer. Right? So a person who understands enough, has the experience enough to tell you, hey, yeah, these algorithms are working without that much bias, because your entire business can be run sideways if you don't understand. Okay, so having said all of that, right, just 2 more slides. My encouragement to people in Pakistan is, we don't know this that well, we don't understand it that well, our data is not that good, it's not that whatever, and we'll talk about some of these pieces, but really, I'll just tell you something, which is one of the other things I've held to heart. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So again, as I said, you don't need to build the perfect data environment and do everything and have everything all digitized to even start to do something. You can start to do something now. The very first thing I tell you is that you need to look at it very much in terms of what the actual need is that you need to do. And I bring this up because, you can look at this and say, oh, let me capture all the data and the machine will do all the learning. But actually, the need and your current situation determine a lot of what you can do. So I just put down here 3 things. And the third one should be very close to you guys. I think it's very important. The first is this idea of putting in place behavioral markers for intelligence on your customer base, right? Everyone that's a consumer company in Pakistan now, and even B2B companies doing this, right? I'll give you a simple example. I work with a client in the tracking industry, and what we've done for them is use algorithms that are actually spatial algorithms to determine whether their customer is parking the car on the road or in a house, in a garage. We've done algorithms to understand whether or not the car, when it goes to work, is, and therefore extrapolated to whether or not that customer is a blue collar or a white collar worker, i.e. an executive or non-executive, based on how their car is parked. We've looked at basically their car driving behavior. We've said, do we think they have another car? Now, all of these are things which are very important. So imagine if you are trying to market a tracker for a second car. You would love to know how much of your customer base actually has a second car. And having these types of indicators, which are algorithms that are running, that are essentially giving you scores on people. So the likelihood of me, having a second car is high because the algorithms of me show that the car usage is sporadic. It doesn't go to the school every single day. There's, it's sort of missing certain patterns. So there's a lot of this type of understanding. The second one, which is a key need in Pakistan and people are doing it, is forecasting sales and demand by region and by product and by customer base. The largest CPG companies over here have historically forecasted based on what is a combination of straight lining and just simple extrapolation. But that's obviously not the right way, particularly in a place like Pakistan, where things are so dynamic that maybe it's more important to do it in another way. And the last piece, which I think is very, very important, is IFRS 9 implementation for a bank. And we'll talk about that a little bit as I go through. So I'm trying to encourage you that rather than look at this in terms of you have to solve this as a big puzzle, I'm trying to encourage everyone to think about this in terms of the specific type of need you have for the business, right? And therefore, starting to identify what are the key issues with this and how you would attack this. And I say this because this can be done, as Nabil was saying, simply with R, which is free, and data, and maybe even with Excel. You don't need to have the platform which is real time. You can still do analytics with whatever you need to do. So when we look at behavioral markers, first of all, it's a human that has to do this, right? The machine is not going to tell you what behaviors are the ones that we think are the most important ones. Then you can verify that with the machine. What data should we use as part of this thing and what data shouldn't we? Again, you can give them the machine all the data, and it'll work through 100 times the processing power to come up with the fact that you should use these data elements. But you can do, as I said, the good is at least having some data to put into the machine as opposed to nothing. And there are other questions that I think you need to start to look at, which have got nothing to do with the data or the analytics, which are around customer data privacy. So again, I think this can be done very much from the perspective of one thing at a time. I'm going to not go do the sales one, and I'm going to go to the IFRS 9 implementation, because I think this is really, really important piece. Obviously, everyone knows that this is coming now. The main change that's happened is what even in GAAP standards and in accounting is, rather than being backward looking, we need to now give some forward perspective. So as you know, and in Pakistan it's been delayed by a year or two, or I think 3 years. But really, this is a challenge. And the challenge is, one, you need to have history. So if you don't have the history of the data, then how do you actually do much analysis? And then in Pakistan, it's one of the biggest issues is we don't have a lot of data history. It's changed in the last 3-4 years only. 5 years ago, it'd be very tough to find people with enough data history to build any real models on them. Second is you have to make some choices as to, based on the data you have, what type of models you will use to do the forward-looking calculations. Now, fundamentally, anything which is forward-looking is statistical in nature. You cannot give a forward-looking number without making it a statistically given thing. So it's totally wrong, by the way, when we all say, okay, my sales next year will be, I'll even say 100 rupees. That's just wrong. The actual right answer is, I expect my sales to be 100 with this much variance. This is the standard deviation on that. That's the way I understand your risk and your return and your uncertainty about that number. And this is what the future is. So, predicted, you need to be in a position where the actual portfolio losses, your probability of defaults in the future are things that you are calculating and working on using within the business. This is obviously based on historical data, but it changes fundamentally the fact that you're no longer counting. You're now predicting, and you're now assessing, and you're now giving a viewpoint. And this is something that accountants have to really, really absorb deeply inside. And by the way, there's no right answer. So they're like three different models for how you'd want to do forward-looking loan losses, depending on the amount of data you have. In Pakistan, the biggest problem is our market is so stochastic, is so dynamic that it's very hard to say कि यार ये model जो 1 साल पहले था, 2 साल पहले की conditions are still holding now. So there's a lot of macro events that you have to deal with and you have to understand. So again, I think that the way you should be thinking about this is a broken down way. Don't think like this is a monolith of data and platform and everything will happen. The need is still the same business needs that always existed. You now have tools to do them better. You now have tools to get it right more often, right? You now have tools that actually allow you to show value and understand and assess value about the future shareholder value, as opposed to backward-looking value, right? Which is the P&L, etc. So I think this is a very, very important piece. The second piece of this is that you need to understand that there is a path. It doesn't just, you don't go from 0 to 100 in one day. And the path is two different things. One is technology investment that you need to make, and the second is the analytics investment that you need to make. And I differentiate the two because technology is enabling platforms. Analytics is actually the people of the capability to deliver on those platforms. And very much everyone needs to be honest with themselves about their own companies and where they're working and say, where do we rely on this? If, for example, you just about, in a company which has a basic data warehouse and has operating infra, like has SAP in place, which is an operating platform, right? Probably the most important thing to do first is diagnostic work, right? And that's probably the work which is the easiest and the one which lends itself in this environment to do. As you start to add both technology investment into this thing and analytical investment into this thing, you can start to move up this chain. And I bring this up simply because I don't think you can get to prescriptive machine learning algorithms without actually walking this chain. Even from a research perspective, you don't end in a prescriptive, you don't start and end with a prescriptive model. You start with diagnostics, then you start to understand how to make this predictive, then you run it for a while and make sure that it works, and then you make it into a prescriptive model. So really understand that this is the journey in which you guys have to start, but the starting is already done. And the question is, how are you going to understand what people are doing in this space? The last piece that I will say is, we talk a lot about data and analytics and AI, but the only thing that should actually matter, particularly to the people on this webinar, is translating all of this into ROI, value creation, what we were talking about earlier. And this viewpoint, I think, is where you can singularly be the ones that are driving it. Because in this viewpoint, the investment required, the return, i.e. the upside, and the risk are not something that a marketer can understand by themselves, or a salesperson will understand, or an operator will understand. This requires a viewpoint of the organization. So in terms of return, we're talking about the uses. I think you need to go through and understand what people are doing, right? Is it a diagnostic model only? A diagnostic model helps me understand something that makes me change my strategy going forward where I'm making a call. But that's not something that's an ongoing thing that I'll be changing on a daily basis. Are these predictive indicators that we're using? The importance of predictive indicators are that they are determining what I'm doing next. So predictive all of a sudden really has an impact on your business that is far more and far deeper than just diagnostic modeling. And prescriptive algorithms is the business is just going off and doing its thing. You program it and it's off and running in this way. And for example, credit provision is one such form of this. Another one might be the fact that when a certain person queues, right? Depending on the quality of the customer, you let him break the queue and you put him in a separate queue. So these are all prescriptive algorithms. And the more prescriptive you have, the more it's affecting every single customer all the time, and it's affecting them in different ways. So your understanding of it changes a bit. You need to understand that the investment is the infrastructure that you have to build. So there's a basic level of infrastructure, which is data dashboards. Right? You have to understand what sort of dashboards am I going to need to build for my company. You have to understand how I'm going to actually store and access my data. It is a lot easier than it used to be, but in the context of Pakistan, this is still a problem that needs to be solved because with it comes cost. And the third thing is you need to understand what sort of platforms do I want to use. Now, I'm hoping that the one thing which has come out clear from our presentation to everyone is that the platforms there's so many out there. When we first started to look at this 2 years ago, when I started to look at the platforms out there, I did this chart, and the chart had like 600 names. I have never been in any space where I've had 600 names and saying, this is my competitive, this is my competition. And the reason is that you've got so many people doing specialized platforms for specific things. And so my answer to this for people is always, I don't know what's the best one. There's always probably one that fits your particular situation and need right now, or is built for your industry, or is built for this purpose. And they're out there. And if you don't want to have to wait to pick the platform, what Nabil said is absolutely true. You need to literally use what is open source software to start the analytics that you want to do. You don't have to wait till you actually have a single data environment and you have a platform that you've researched and you've done scoring on and you've picked. While you do that, the basics of analytics can still be done. And a large part of my work in Pakistan is trying to do this with clients. So telling them that you can still do stuff, you don't have to wait. And then the last piece, which I think people here really forget, but I think is very, very important. And this is, to my mind, the risk. See, the risk of analytics is not the models that you're building. The models are sitting in code. The risk is not even the infrastructure and this cost, but that's a known risk. The actual risk is governance. So how are you governing your data? And what are your data policies? Because if they're wrong and something happens to your data in terms of, God forbid, it be stolen or it basically disappear, everything will fail in your model. So let's assume all my models use one table, which is a customer ID and name table. If that customer ID name table disappears, what do? It's done. So I think data policies are very, very important. Second is data quality. The biggest struggle in Pakistan has been data quality. Part of this is people just don't have a lot of history. Part of it is the history they have is not the same history. So it's not, it's like going back over time, and today I'm looking at an apple, but 2 years ago, actually, the data wasn't really for an apple, it was for an orange. And like 3 years ago, before that, the data wasn't really for an orange, it was for a nashpati. So putting that into a straight line and saying, okay, that's good quality data is a challenge. So understanding how bad and good the data is and what the holes are is a key piece of determining the risk. And then lastly, having in place processes and procedures for actually doing the analytics and machine learning. You know, outcome assessment is very, very tough. To assess outcome, you need to know some sense of the experiment design, and you need to have a sense of the data going in. But if you can't assess the outcome in a way that makes you comfortable, then you will never use it. So having these SOPs on the governance side is very important, and these are the risks to manage. So as you go in as financial people, as finance and as accounting into companies, and you're responsible to understand the company, I really encourage you to start to look at these things this way, very practically. If the company doesn't have a data policy or doesn't have a policy to govern a certain model, you should be worried about the risk attached to it, right? If the company basically is doing predictive indicators, you should make sure that they know what they're doing to do predictive math, or you should have somebody assess the statistical nature of their predictive indicators to make sure they're not falling for any of the statistical biases that happen in data. Autocorrelation, you know, you have like models where the distribution isn't normal, so the model is giving you an erroneous answer. So I think that this becomes like a good little checklist for people to look through and understand कि मैं risk ले कितना रहा हूँ and return कितनी आ रही है और investment मुझे किधर और क्या करनी पड़ेगी. All right, with that, I'll stop with my thing, and I think we're now going to turn the floor over to the audience, right, for questions.
Hi, so thank you for your superior insight. You know, it's such an impressive presentation that you've just given. I think anyone can use this presentation sort of as a blueprint if they want to start towards using and maturing data in their organization, you know, data-driven decision making. So thanks a lot for this insight. You know, I myself have learned so many important things from it, you know, so really appreciate that. I think with now this, we are going to open the floor for Q&A session. But I think first of all, I would like to ask each of our presenters a question about, a question with regard to their own specific background. So if I may ask Mr. Asif Salim, is that can he give us an example where he has used his data-driven decision making in his in any of the organization that he has worked, and how has it helped him to improve the outcome for his organization?
So Nabil, absolutely. I think one thing that you mentioned in your presentation, and I think Saud Saab also kind of talked about in his presentation, I think I really like what he shared about, the Chinese proverb that he talked about. The best thing is to go and make it happen, is to do it. And until the time you don't do it, you will not understand what it takes to kind of deliver. So, the reason I am kind of working as a banking innovation advisor for Oracle is because 15 years I've been there, done that, right? And I used to head the digital business for Standard Chartered globally. Now, let me tell you, data-driven decision making was so important because, across Asia, Africa, Middle East, we were kind of dealing with close to about 15 million retail banking customers. Now, these retail banking customers were split across various different consumer segments. And I heard Saud mention a little bit about, different consumer segments and how to go after that. Affluent, highly affluent, as well as personal banking segments was where the business was divided from a retail banking perspective. Then from a private banking and priority banking, it was actually a different level altogether. But then when you continue to kind of deep dive, understand, I was responsible for digital banking business. Uh, Out of 15 million retail banking customers that at that point in time, close to about 10 million were consumer banking active. And what I mean by that, these are people who've got some kind of a banking uh, active relationships. These are people who are basically interacting with your bank account in the last 6 months. And then you further take it down a level to kind of understand how many of them were digital active. Now, these are people who are logging into your mobile banking application once a month. And then if you further take it down, you understand basically that what these digital active consumers were doing across sales, service, and payments transaction. So like having a top level view of basically understanding the total lay of the land at a 15 million consumer banking retail active level, then basically bringing it down to a few thousand, which basically kind of belong to different devices. Now, imagine you've got this data available, you're putting in various different cuts, right? How many of them are iPhone users? How many of them are Android users, right? How many of them who are iPhone users have actually done a payment transaction? What was the average balances of those accounts, right? There are so many cuts to really look after. And if you try to do it physically, or if imagine there were like 20, human beings just sitting there and crunching this data, you will never be able to get those insights. And by the time you will be able to kind of take some decision, the time would already be gone, right? Which means that the value that you can really achieve out of that is gone. So I'll like to talk about my experience over here of kind of leading this change for Standard Chartered. But then again, this is across every industry, not even banking. But I think banking, it's huge because we've got like millions and millions customers. Normally, even if you look at a big bank in Pakistan, there'll be millions of customers, say it be HBL or National Bank, etc. There's so much that could be done in there. So
Okay,
hope I answered the question.
Thanks a lot. That has been fascinating, Asif. I've got a question from audience, and I would like to ask so talk about it. So you touch upon that the fact that even if you don't have nothing, you have got open source tools and you can use them. Uh, um, One of our audience members asked that how can we start? How can we gain any proficiency? Where can this journey start? What is your experience been? When you are there teaching your junior colleagues or staff member? to gain proficiency in these tools and techniques. So can you hear me?
And Nabil, is this a question to me or Socha?
To Sousa, sorry.
I think his screen is hanging.
Yes, the voice is breaking up. I don't know. My connection is okay. You can hear
It's
me?
better now. So it is better.
So, did you get the
Okay,
question?
let me.
Or Asif can take this.
Yes,
Asif, can you
Asif,
take this question? I think Sosa probably dropped.
Yeah, no worries. And I think Nadeem, you can also jump in to add. You know, I know you're doing a lot of stuff on cloud technologies in Pakistan, and in fact, you're part of the Prime Minister Advisory Council as well. So, you know, just to add my 2 cents over here, I think absolutely. I think the first way to start this whole process is to basically have the right mindset, right? I think a lot of times it's not about the tools and solutions anymore, right? I think gone are those days where basically people used to complain that, hey, listen, I've got no solutions available, right? I think it's the mindset that is most important, and and I think you always have to start where you want to get to, right? And I think a lot of problem is because when people do not start with that mindset, they are like moving around round and round in circles. So I think culture is very important, right? That's the first thing. The second thing I think is very, very important is that, you know, you need to understand that it's not about those details anymore. It's about kind of interactivity, you know, the ability to kind of interact with these modern apps. You know, there are everything that is available at your disposal. It's just that you need to be open and transparent. And the last bit is basically around process, right? Then how do you kind of interact with that process? You know, what kind of data is going, you know, I'll still say garbage in, garbage out. I think I learned about this like 20 years ago, but it is still very relevant in a lot of ways. So this would be my 3 pointers here. I will, you know, leave it to Nadeem Saab and Saud Hashmi Saab as well to kind of give their inputs.
Yeah, I would just invite Nadeem Saab to.
Thank you very much. I think Asif has touched upon very pertinent question that it's not the tools. Tools are available now with the cloud technology. It's so advanced now. It's not in an initial stage. It's been generations ahead. Specifically, the Oracle we got in Gen 2. The data integration and data analytics are basically as simple to use as you are using probably in Excel. But I think the mindset is, I think our next generation is what we call crowdsourced information sharing. Let me just give you an example. If your son wants to buy a mobile, a person post on his Instagram or tweet or Facebook, what mobile I should buy it, and that 20 people give them experiences. So that interaction coming through now with this next we call Generation Z, and with availability of this cloud platforms, I think one of the advantage is so much data is available. You can really parse the right data, and you can make right decisions towards it. One thing which I think Saud mentioned is, and one of the question was, is how do I see the future? How do what data I need to know which can give me do perspective. I think important part. Which data will comes in? That's where you see the historical trend in a little bit more into the future. What's trends coming in? I think that's where the cloud comes into the play. That's where the most what we call data available within your organization. But the most important is data available outside your organizations. I think the outside data, which I definitely can give you the predictability which you're looking toward your business. So you want to add to it?
Can you guys hear me or?
We can hear you, but your voice just cut.
It did. I'm not sure which part I missed.
Did you meant to invite Sousa for his comments?
Yeah, I'd like to see if Sousa wants to add something towards it. But I said how the data perspective, because the data available within our organization is not the only data. The most important data is sometimes available outside your organization. I think that's where the integration of data, and that's what we call data lake houses concepts coming in.
Sousa, are you there?
I think we dropped him in. Keeping the time shortage, I think Nabil, we only have about 9 minutes. I think we can always ask the audience and participants to direct questions to our panel. You can always reach them.
I think we are breaking away. I think in the next part, we just want to. I think at this part stage, I would like to invite Mr. Rana and Usman Khan, Chairman DAAB, for his closing remarks in this regard.
Said it later on. So the closing remarks. Rana Usman Saab is a chairman of Digital Assurance Board, very competent and experienced chartered accountant, versatile experience for the last 25 years, currently the partner with Yusuf Father. So I would like to invite Rana Usman Saab for a few words.
Thank you very much, Nadeem Saab, for your invitation. Formally, Mr. President Iftikhar Taj, Nadeem Malik Saab, Asif Salim, Saud Hashmi, Nabil, of course, for his lot of coordination. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good evening. I think we all know that realizing the importance of this technology developments and their impact on our profession, be we are in practice, in industry, or let's say in education, the ICAP established this forum of DAAB, Digital Assurance and Accounting Board. I mean, it's a wonderful forum. I must say that I have a very good experience working with Nadeem Saab. Although I'm leading this forum, but definitely I'm not the person to lead it. It's the technology experts like Nadeem Saab, and we have a lot of other people from industry, profession, education, technology. So collectively, the team is trying to do something for our members, actually. This platform, if you recall and just look at some, few months data, we have come up with a number of events like the webinars on artificial intelligence, data analytics, digitalization, its impact on our profession. We have tried to bring a lot of technology experts and subject specialists to you for these events, and I'm quite hopeful and confident that you must have been benefited out of all these events. And today's event is also one of the, out of that series, actually. I think I mentioned the last event as well. We wanted to have a technology conference, but unfortunately, this COVID situation didn't allow us to do that. But definitely, whatever we conceived for that technology conference, we are trying to bring that through these events and webinars. And I think today was one of that, one event of that series, and I hope you all enjoyed. At least I all, enjoyed a lot. I've learned a lot as well. Both presentations were excellent. Question answer was good. It was really mind-boggling for me hearing these technology experts saying such things that it's just all together. Going to change our profession. Like Asif said, it's a from milestone to moments. I mean, this is a real terminology. I must appreciate Asif. I don't know from where you have taken, but this is something which is really impacting. And the data, of course, the volume, its timing, its integration, interlinking with other data sources. I mean, ultimately, it's going to impact the decision-making process. And we being one of the key stakeholders or key team players, our work is also going to impacted by this data thing. And of course, finance professionals cannot stay away from these developments. Saud has also, I mean, very rightly pointed out a number of things. And if I could summarize, I mean, things from was, is to will, or past, present to future, or from yesterday, today to tomorrow. I mean, that is something which is to be conceived by the accountants. I mean, I being a traditional accountant, or I mean, you can say that I'm one of, I mean, now I'm getting into that senior slot also. We have been trained to look at the past. I mean, we used to have one saying that why accountant crosses the road. So the answer was that because he did it last year. So last year in history, that is very important for accountants. Actually, we have trained for that. But now the future is knocking at our door, and now we have to learn all these technologies which are going to impact the future actually. And we have to play our role in that. We have to be, I mean, we have to stay within that key team, effective team, which is going to make all these decisions. We can't stay away from that. So if we want to be part of that, definitely we have to think about the future. And future, of course, is going to be these all technologies. And from this forum, and I would say ICAP is taking a lot of initiatives in this for our students or upcoming members. I'm quite confident soon you will see a new education scheme. The whole education scheme has been revamped. New technology contents have been added, looking at the future requirements. And I'm sure that that will help our upcoming members to learn these technologies. And of course, with these technologies, they'll be performing better in their course, the career path. Similarly, these current members for this DAAB platform has been established, and we are trying to bring, making some effort to bring this technology thing to our members. You can look at these events, webinars, which we are organizing on quite regular basis. One initiative is in the pipeline, and I'm sure that you all are going to like it, benefited out of it, is a one short course of 100 hours plus of data analytics. I think this is the most important thing which we must develop. And soon we are just finalizing it and making closing efforts for that. And hopefully we are going to launch it soon. So I'm quite sure that you all will be benefited out of it, and you'll be participating in that. So we look forward to your suggestions, your contributions, whatever you feel that ICAP should be doing for this technology, expertise to be developed into our profession, professional members, be they are in practice, be they are, let's say, in industry. We have also launched one survey, and I would request all of those who are in practice and attending this webinar, they should also participate in that survey, because through that survey, we are trying to get the data or information about the competence and capability level at the moment, so that if we want to do something, or let's say support our members to bring technologies into their businesses and practices, so we should be able to gauge the need, and according to the need and requirements, we should come forward and bring something for them. So I think with all this, once again, I'm thankful to all speakers, panelists for the effort they have put in, the valuable time they've given to this event. They have accepted our request. And of course, all the participants, you have spared time, you have participated in this. And I'm quite confident you must have enjoyed it. You must have got the benefit out of it. And inshallah, we will keep on bringing these events to you, and we work together to develop the requisite skills, keep on developing and updating the requisite skills, so that whatever we claim that we are the important pillar of this, let's say, financial segment or the businesses, so we still continue to remain and retain that position of importance. Thank you once again, and back to Nabil, to you, or Nadeem Malik Sam, I mean, whoever is willing to take over.
I'll take it over from here. Rana Sam, I would like to, I just would like to thank you for all the participants.
Yes.
I'm very excited and to see that they've been engaged throughout this session. And I'm very positive and confident they have learned a lot. And I'm also sure they have a lot of questions to ask. What are the key to success in any society, in any profession, is collaboration. Because that's one of the things which we are good. Sometimes we are weak, but sometimes we are shy. I encourage all the participants to collaborate, share the knowledge, share the issues, share the problem. Collectively, we can achieve the objective of this seminar and the webinars and most of those initiatives which DAAB has taken under the ICAP leadership. So once again, I think thank you very much, everyone, my eminent speakers, for your time, sharing your experience, Rana Sahab for leading this initiative, and leadership of ICAP, particularly if the Sahab leading this thing to at the new era of thing. I think that's where the future is. That's where we all get together. Once again, thank you very much, everyone. And we'll look forward to see you again in our next session. Our next webinar will be announced soon. Have a good day. Enjoy yourself. Pakistan Zindabad.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Allah
care.
Hafiz.
Stay safe. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.